Welcome to PDP, Prime Development Podcast. Become the leader people will follow. Howdy doody. This is Nick Humfeld here from Prime Development, and I was going to do a quick video on answering some more questions and concerns, as well as kind of go over my background and how I got into coaching and what I'm doing. Essentially, one of the key questions that come up a lot, or concerns, is that with what I do, I primarily coach and do about 99% of my business online. And a lot of people get concerns and they have skepticism and whatever because, I mean, let's face it, there's a lot of scam artists out there and stuff. And so it's very hard to trust somebody that you haven't seen in person. And I guess the other thing is more wondering how I'm able to do what I do through online rather than in person. And I've thought about this a lot, and I've done both. I've worked as a in-person trainer before at a facility where I would work with clients one-on-one. And I've also done it online. I've been successful at both, but I have found that I am able to help much more people online than I ever have in person. And that comes down to a couple different factors. First of all, if I am in person with somebody, then what happens is, say I'm in the gym and I'm there for 9 hours with 1 hour lunch break. Typically, I'm scheduling clients. Most of them are hour sessions. So that allows me to get through 8 people in that given day. Okay. Now, if I extend that out and I'm going 5 days a week with 40 hours a week, then theoretically I'd have 40 clients a week. And so if I'm doing that, I mean, that's fine. That would, build me up. But what happens, I have found, is that by the end of the day, each day, if I have a full stack day, I am exhausted and, as I should be. But what happens is I'm able to address the concerns and specifics of that one client in that hour I'm with them. If they have a follow-up question, or if a different client has a question the next hour, or the next person I'm with, I can't answer them then. I'm giving all my attention to that one person, which is great. And it works out great, especially if you have somebody that has literally no experience at all, and they need that one-on-one direct supervision. That is fine, and I do take on a few clients like that in person. However, that really limits my capabilities in being able to help more people, because since I'm only able to give attention just to that one person in that hour, if other people have questions, I can't answer them until I have free time. And usually in my free time, it's at the end of a long day and I'm just exhausted. And I don't really feel like doing it on the weekends because I'm not getting any rest. And the other thing is, too, on my 1 hour lunch break I used to have, where people would come up and ask me questions then because I was so busy all the time. And it's like I don't even get myself time to rest. So basically, I have found that by doing things online, I'm able to help just as many people. And if questions come up, I can fire back answers to everybody. So like when I'm working with people online, I set them up with a exercise program. And if they need extra assistance, usually I will video record the different workouts and send them links so that they can see what the exercises are and know how to do them. And then I also devise a specific meal plan, and I explain that through videos, or just make sure that they know exactly how to follow that. And by doing that, I send them all that information. And if they have little questions about something, they can go back to the links or whatever, or look at my YouTube channel or podcast and figure out what their answer is, or they can just send me a message. And if everybody's doing that, it might take me a couple minutes to get to your question, but I can answer and fire away, and then I can go to the next person, and I'm able to be much more accessible, I have found. And it also makes me a lot less drained at the end of the day, week, month, because when it's time for me to rest and have my own personal time, I can do that. And I'm still able to get to everybody and all their questions. Other points to make with this is that in-person one-on-one, it does have a benefit to where they can see that I'm giving my attention directly to them. And a lot of human gestures and interactions make people feel a lot more trusting. And so I understand that component of it. One thing that I have been doing lately as my clientele builds up, just to make sure that everybody is getting their quality time and their questions answered or whatever. If it's specific, if it's something that would require more than just a quick exchange of a text or email or whatever, I've been scheduling in my calendar half-hour blocks with whatever fits between my schedule and the client, to where once a week in that half hour we do check-ins. I would prefer to do them through Skype or some video software so people can actually communicate and see me and whatever. Or a phone call is fine too. Or, if it's just through a chat box or something. But that way they have a specific time set aside just for them. And it might not even take the full half hour. Sometimes it's only a 10-minute conversation. But it's just a way for me to check in, make sure that they are on track with what they are doing, things are flowing smoothly, and help them very specifically so they feel like they're getting my attention. And I found that works really well for that. But this process of me doing it online allows me to open up myself to other people more and help more people. And setting it up with weekly check-ins allows me to do that, give them some attention, and just make sure that everybody is taken care of. Some of the other concerns about the online thing have been, how I'm able to advise on specific things, not seeing them in person. And that's where, I talked about this in another video, but where it comes down to them sending me pictures every 1, 2, or 3 weeks, depending on what stage they're at, because that allows me to physically see changes that are happening. It allows me to see their body, notice if they have any hormone imbalances. I talked about that in another video where, based on body fat ratios can indicate different hormone imbalances or what's going on. And based on the feedback I get from each client, that lets me kind of know what they're feeling, and based on those symptoms paired with the pictures, I can make appropriate changes. So that for me, I guess, has been how I have found that I can help more people and do what I do to the best of my ability. And then to go into a little bit more background about myself. So where I all started was, I guess, way back from as early as I can remember as a kid. I was a farm boy, grew up on a small dairy farm in Wisconsin, and I just remember everybody I was around. I had a very big family, and so my dad, and I remember his brothers, and a lot of them were all farmers too, but it just seemed like all the men that were in my family were all just built really solid, and they all had really big muscles, and like I remember my dad had a six-pack and a hairy chest, and I mean he still does, and he's over 60, and it was just the way of life, but that was all I knew. And so I knew that I looked up to my dad and I wanted to look like him, and so I started that path for myself, and I never really knew how to get there. So when I was young, I started doing chores on the farm and lifting, throwing hay bales and all that. And I had a little tiny dumbbell with those old-fashioned like sand-filled weights in our basement, and it was just one of them. And I think in total it was like maybe 25 or 30 pounds. And I just started doing any exercise I could think of with those. Just like I'd lay on my back and push it up like a little bench press, and do curls, anything I could think of to do. And then eventually I found myself getting into wrestling towards a transition from middle school into high school, and followed that all the way into a year of wrestling at college. And that got me the leanness and the body look that I wanted, but I also was trying to maintain weight for a weight class. So when I got to college, I was really, really small, like 130 pounds. And so I knew that I had the trim look, but I wanted to be bigger. And so that's when I started and shifted into bodybuilding, got into that in college. And my journey has kind of like kept going ever since. But while I was in college, getting into that, I remember I'd switched my major a couple times throughout college, and I found myself getting very deep into psychology. And I really, really enjoyed it. But there was one summer I was taking a psychology course, and it was health psych. And in particular, I was sitting there in the gym, and I was really contemplating life. And I was like, well, what can I do with a psychology degree? And I wasn't really sure. And I was sitting there, and I was in the gym looking down at the floor by the weights. And I'm like, well, what do I really enjoy doing? And I was like, I enjoy doing this. So I decided to take and switch over into our exercise physiology program. And then I started to look into nutrition because I was really, excited, and it really intrigued me. So I started looking into that too. And so it was exercise physiology and nutritional sciences were my studies. And it was super exciting because I was able to take everything literally that I was learning in class. And I always paid attention because I could directly take and apply that to the gym that night. And the more I learned, the more I applied, and I saw a lot of results from it. And so the only other step beyond that was like, okay, well, I did notice there was a big cutoff between experience and, bodybuilding coaches or other people with more extreme health views and textbook. And so trying to bridge that gap, I ended up hiring my first coach. And I got ready for my first show towards the end of my college career. And I remember that I was doing everything perfectly. For 18 weeks in a row, I didn't have a single ounce of sugar, and I didn't have a cheat meal or anything. And I looked amazing when I got to stage, but I would have periods of time where, even though I had a six-pack, I was super bloated and I looked pregnant, and it was uncomfortable. I started to get bloody stools in the bathroom, and I knew something was wrong. But I was like, this doesn't make sense because I'm eating everything that I can think of that's healthy. There's nothing bad in my diet, and so it allowed me to dig deeper and self-analyze and go into more self-research on nutrition. And that's when I stumbled upon looking into dieting for your blood type. And because health, the area of health and nutrition, it's such a gray area, because you can Google anything and get a million different answers. And some are going to be like, oh yeah, paleo is the best way to go. Others are like, oh, you got to go Atkins, or you got to go keto, or whatever the case may be. And then there's other people saying, no, that's wrong. And then there's just so many different areas, and it's such a gray area that there is no right answer. There's a lot of programs that have good principles behind them, but even with me personally, what I was following based on pretty standard protocol for nutrition, something was wrong. So anything I read, I have a little skepticism on. So I read that, and I took it and applied some of it, soaked in the information. But then when I went to go do my college internship at Lifetime Fitness, up there they had a lot of different lab tests that you could do. And in doing those, they actually had one, and it was called Food Sensitivity Panel. And it was 96 different foods. And they would take some of your blood, and they would measure the inflammatory response of your blood to those specific foods. And in doing so, I actually found that the very, very strong foods that the blood type diet suggested I stay away from also came back on my sheet as the most inflammatory for my body. And so I was like, okay, there is something there. However, there were some in between that were like kind of inflammatory, and ones that it suggested were kind of mediocre. And there was a little bit of hit or miss there. But the strong ones that it suggested matched perfectly with my lab results. So I started using that as big part of my knowledge for how I created plans. Also, I remember the day I got my lab results back. I'll post the picture for you guys on this video, but I remember I got them back, and so I made all the changes, and I got them back on a Friday, I remember, and I took all those foods away, followed that perfect. 2 days later, I took a picture, and it was on a Sunday. So 48 hours went by, and I had lost 12 pounds, and it looked like I had been dieting for probably like 2 months at least. And basically what happened is my body was cleared of so much inflammation that I got rid of a lot of extra toxins and stuff that were sitting floating around. I actually had so much inflammation. I had something called gastric leakage, or like it was kind of like IBS. You know, my intestines were inflamed, but I had juices and stuff leaking through my intestinal passages, and it was not very comfortable. And so when my body was able to get rid of all of that stuff and all that old junk and a lot of old stuff that had been sitting in my system for a long time, I just started to feel a lot better, and body fat and weight just started to fall off me. And I found that since that moment in my life, following a lot of principles and doing things that are very specific to my own body, and then pairing it with things I learned later, like I was talking about with the different hormone balances and stuff like that, basically I was able to allow my body to work with me rather than probably 90% of the plans out there that you follow, where you try something, it has good principles to it, but your body is still fighting with you on some level of something. For example, like keto. You hear all these people talking about keto and how that's the miracle for losing a lot of weight fast or body fat or whatever. And while the essential principle is staying away from carbs, so that makes sense, because if you don't have carbs, you don't really get a lot of fluxes of insulin. If you don't get a lot of fluxes of insulin in your system, your body is in fat burning mode like all the time. And so you can lose a lot of body fat. However, if you are doing things unknowingly, eating certain foods, and based on my results, one of mine was chicken actually. And every bodybuilder eats chicken, but was not good for me. So if I continue to eat that, but I'm also following, say, keto, well, my body is inflamed all the time, and it's making it extremely difficult for my body to release any toxins, body fat, and do anything it has to do, because it's trying to fight that rather than just work with me on trying to do whatever goal I'm trying to achieve. So that is kind of my past and what brought me to where I'm at now. And I know this video is getting a little bit long, but I think it's worth it in saying that through that entire process, I found that everything kind of panned out and happened for a reason. And I'm so glad that I shifted my college choices, because getting that far into psychology has helped me a lot with what I do and understanding people too. But all of that kind of went to a head it was 2013 in November. Actually, my I was working up at that Lifetime Fitness, and I remember getting a phone call, and my parents and my brother was there too, but they were doing their daily chores in the barn, and they could smell something burning. And what had happened was, long story short, that a stray piece of hot metal got blown up into our hayloft while they were putting fresh sawdust up there for bedding for the cattle, and it started smoldering inside the sawdust. So my dad had gone up there to check it, and he removed a hay bale out of the way because he couldn't see anything. And when he did that, that smoldering piece, it caught oxygen, and that dry sawdust and hay and all the wood in the hayloft all caught fire instantly, including himself. And it was a very traumatic experience. He tried to get down several times. He had to yell down, tell my mom and my brother to run, get out of the building. And he kept falling back into the fire a couple times. And he was about to give up because he said he had no energy left. And because he had to crawl out of a little pit of hay to try to get to this hole in the floor and jump down to the next level. And he said he had no energy left. But he felt a hand or something grab him by the back of the shirt and lift him up. And with that, he got up over that little hay mound, got down to the next floor. He dropped 12 feet or so into concrete, but he was able to get to the other end of the building with the help of my brother, get the fire out, and then he waited for the paramedics when he got outside. And I remember that when he was in the hospital recovering, they told him that it would be a good 5 months before he could start physical therapy. And even with that, it would be quite a long time until he was fully recovered. And then on top of that, because he had third-degree burns on about 25% of his body or so, and his hands got it the worst, that he would never use his hands again because it had fried through all the nerves. And his hands would just be paddles for the rest of his life. Well, I don't know if it was just his work ethic from being a farmer or what, or his experience that he had up in the hayloft, but he kept pushing to try to do physical therapy. And I remember, I can't even imagine with the pain, but every day because of his burns, they had to scrub his skin off and shave him so that the hairs wouldn't get covered up by all this dead skin and everything trying to grow. And so through all that, he just kept pushing, and he ended up, instead of 5 months, he got approved for physical therapy within a couple weeks. And then he ended up pushing and pushing. And after a long day of therapy, he ended up paging the nurse back in after he had something to eat to do another round of therapy. And in doing so, he was actually out of the hospital just before Christmas. It was just 5 weeks, and he was back home and started, his recovery process for probably the next, 7-10 months. He was at home recovering, but to this day now, he has about 95% function of his hands again and can do almost all of the same things he did before. And then they rebuilt the farm and everything. So because of that, and I can't even imagine what that was like, that pushed me to want to help extend what I learned from him in terms of being a leader, to try to help other people. And more so than just the exercise and the nutrition, I want to help people achieve things, just to be better people in their life and be other role models for people that they can look up to and keep passing along good habits to create more leaders for people down the line. And that's where I kind of started. The foundation of Prime Development is based on a book that I'm currently working on podcast, but How to Be a Superhero. And that all comes down to you being the best version of yourself and taking control of your life so that the habits that you develop can make you a good leader to help influence more people. So that's essentially my background and kind of what's pushing and driving me personally to help and better other people. I'm sure there's some other stuff that I missed, and as I get more questions from people, I will go ahead and make some more videos. Hopefully not as long as this one, but that will allow me to answer people's questions.